The old church stood quietly at the edge of the town, its stained glass windows glowing faintly against the darkness. It was a cold November evening, and a steady rain drummed against the roof as Father Michael prepared to lock the doors for the night. He had just extinguished the last candle when the heavy wooden entrance creaked open. A man stepped inside. He looked to be in his early 40s, wearing a long black overcoat drenched by the rain. His dark hair clung to his forehead, and his face was pale, almost lifeless. There was something unsettling about him, not because he appeared violent, but because he looked like someone carrying a burden too heavy for any person to bear. Without saying a word, he walked straight toward the confessional booth. Father Michael nodded politely. "Good evening, my son." The stranger stopped for only a moment before replying. "I need to confess." His voice was calm, but there was a strange emptiness in it. The priest entered the opposite side of the confessional and waited. Several long seconds passed. Then the man finally spoke. "Father, I've spent the last 14 years pretending to be someone I'm not." Father Michael listened quietly. "I stole another man's identity." The priest remained silent, allowing him to continue. "But that's not the worst thing I've done." Another pause. Then came the words that froze the priest where he sat. "I killed a man." The church suddenly felt much colder. The rain outside seemed louder than before. "I didn't mean for it to happen," the stranger continued. "At least, that's what I told myself for years." His breathing grew heavier. "It happened 14 years ago. I was desperate. I owed dangerous people more money than I could ever repay. One night, I broke into the home of a wealthy businessman hoping to steal enough cash to disappear forever. But he came home early. I panicked. We struggled. And when it was over, he was lying on the floor. He never got back up." Father Michael closed his eyes. The stranger continued speaking in the same emotionless tone. "I ran. I took his wallet. His identification. His car. I burned my own belongings and disappeared. For 14 years, everyone believed I had vanished. My family thought I was dead. The police searched for me for years before the investigation went cold. I built a completely different life. I found work. I rented apartments. I even made friends. They all believed I was the man whose identity I stole." The priest had heard many confessions over the years. But never anything like this. Then the stranger whispered something even more disturbing. "I've smiled at people who had no idea they were shaking hands with a killer." Silence filled the confessional. Finally Father Michael asked softly, "Why are you telling me this now?" The man gave a slow, tired sigh. "Because I can't sleep anymore. Every night I see his face. I hear his wife screaming. I see his little daughter standing in the doorway. I thought time would erase the guilt. It only made it worse. I've spent 14 years running. I'm tired." Then he said something that made Father Michael's heart race. "They're close." The priest frowned. "Who?" "The police. I've seen the same car following me for 3 days. I know they've found me. I came here because I wanted someone to know the truth before everything ended." He slowly stood up. "Thank you for listening." The stranger stepped out of the confessional. He walked calmly toward the church entrance. Father Michael remained seated, silently praying for the troubled man. Just as the stranger reached for the church door, bright blue and red lights flashed through the stained glass windows. Tires screeched outside. Police vehicles surrounded the church from every direction. Within seconds, armed officers rushed toward the entrance. The church doors burst open. "Police! Don't move." The stranger didn't even flinch. Instead, he slowly raised both hands into the air. "I've been expecting you," he said quietly. The officers cautiously approached before placing him in handcuffs. No resistance. No attempt to escape. Nothing. As detectives escorted him outside, one officer looked at him in disbelief. "We've been searching for you for months." The stranger simply nodded. "I know." The entire town watched as police vehicles carried him away. News spread quickly. Many believed his arrest was pure coincidence. But investigators later revealed a very different story. 3 months earlier, advances in forensic technology had allowed detectives to re-examine evidence from the 14-year-old homicide. A partial fingerprint recovered from the victim's home had never been fully identified. Using modern forensic analysis, investigators matched it to fingerprints taken during a routine employment background check years after the suspect had assumed his false identity. Detectives had quietly reopened the case. Rather than arrest him immediately, they began watching him, gathering additional evidence to ensure they could prove every detail in court. They followed him for weeks. Documented his movements. Recovered financial records. Located witnesses from 14 years earlier. The evidence became overwhelming. But they never expected what happened next. Hours after the arrest, detectives obtained a warrant to search the suspect's home. Inside, they discovered dozens of journals. Every notebook contained handwritten entries dating back more than a decade. Page after page described the crime. His fear. His guilt. His nightmares. The names of people he'd lied to. The birthdays he celebrated under another man's identity. The holidays he spent pretending to be someone else. The final journal ended with a chilling sentence written the very morning he entered the church. "Tonight, I stop running." During questioning, the suspect confessed to everything. He led investigators to hidden evidence they had never recovered, including the victim's watch and several personal belongings buried deep in a wooded area outside the city. His confession matched the physical evidence perfectly. The victim's family, who had waited 14 painful years for answers, finally learned the truth. Justice had arrived, late, but not too late. When reporters later asked one detective what surprised him most about the case, his answer wasn't the confession. It wasn't the stolen identity. It wasn't even the years the man had spent hiding. It was this. "The hardest criminals to catch aren't always the smartest," the detective said. "Sometimes they're simply the ones who convince themselves they can outrun their own conscience." In the end, the police found the man. But long before the handcuffs closed around his wrists. His guilt had already imprisoned him. Some people escaped the crime scene. Some escaped the investigation. But very few ever escaped themselves. If you enjoyed this true crime style story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more gripping crime stories every week.